Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this week we are welcoming in Michaelbrent Collings. He doesn't have a lot going on for him. He's just an international bestseller, produced screenwriter, multiple Dragon Award finalist, multiple Bram Stoker Award finalist, and was only voted one of the top 20 all-time greatest horror writers by Ranker.com. So, not much there. Nothing to see here, but hopefully you'll listen anyway. Michaelbrent Collings, welcome into the garden. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You don't know that yet, but hopefully it will be.
I go in with the assumption it'll be nice. That keeps the knives sheathed.
Yeah. As Homer said, the blade itself incites violence. We don't want any of that. So aside from what I read about you, which seems incredible, tell the world a little bit about yourself. Well, first, this is a audio, so no one else is going to see this but me. But if they see you in other places, they're going to see your backdrop is awesome. You have, it must be book covers and the movie posters or whatever. It's a little blurred for me, which is probably part of my vision and partly part of but you have a host of awesome things which I'm assuming are works that you've either written or been a part of behind you. But yeah, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, and maybe we'll get into that awesome display that's behind you.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's not you. It is blurry on purpose because I didn't want it distracting from the very mediocrity that you're looking at. My covers are much better looking than me. I used to be a normal guy. I was a lawyer, and just trying to be a normal human with a grown-up job, and I ended up getting fired because my wife was really sick, and I was taking care of her more than I was in the office, and I couldn't get another job because that's hard to do if you have fired on your resume. So I started telling stories, and I'd been doing that my whole life. My dad's was a creative writing director for a university. And I couldn't get a job as a grown-up, so I receded to my childhood and started making better money that way. So I've been writing stories full-time for, 12, 13 years now.
Oh, it's sort of like my story, being a lawyer, except I got fired for different reasons. Stayed a lawyer where I'm still employed, and didn't. Well, technically, I wasn't fired. I was voted out, which might be worse, might be harder to do. And I make no money doing anything else, but I still try. But we'll see. Do I really try? I don't know. Anyway. Not about me. It's about you. So yeah, this is great. I mean, I'm sorry that your wife was sick, but obviously we all have prompting events in our lives that force pivots, and that forced a pivot, and it looks like that worked out for the best. Hopefully she's better now. You haven't said anything to the contrary, so I'm going to guess she's doing just fine. And
yeah, she's great.
And the rest of the works are horror, but that one isn't.
Yeah, that's what my wife is. My non-horror, the least horrific part of my universe. She takes care of me now all the time, and her health is better than mine. And yeah, so we did a nice flip flop, and she takes care of me and makes sure that I put pants on every day, so it works out pretty well.
Well, that seems a little bit unreasonable for me, but all right, whatever works in your relationship is fine. My now wife is not as concerned with whether I wear pants or not, but she does make sure that I shower periodically. So
critical once a year, whether I need it or not.
I know, seriously. I mean. It's like that old joke, and this is how stupid and now old the joke is. But when I was a kid, you told Polish jokes, right? I mean, which is done. So anyway, insert whatever ethnicities you want into this, or let's just make them from different planets to try not to offend anyone, which is impossible. So this is World War II. It's in the army, and there's a Britishman, a Frenchman, Native American, and a Polish soldier going into the line for the quartermaster. And they say, how many pairs of underwear do you want? And the British guy goes, I need, 7. And they go, okay. The Frenchman goes, I need 8. And they go, okay. And the Native American says 2. And the quartermaster goes, 2? Are you sure? He goes, yeah. Wear one, wash one. Oh, very practical. And then the Polish soldier goes up and says, I need 12. And the quartermaster goes, 12? That seems like a lot, but okay. And he goes, yeah, January, February, March.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Everybody out there is ready to yell at me. This was the 70s. And I think that Poland is a great and strong country, and they've obviously showed that very much in the last 3.5 years.
Yeah. I grew up around the same time, so my mom heard me telling one of those jokes once, and I didn't even know what a Polish, meant when I was telling the joke. So I got a really stern talking to, and after that she said, anytime you want to tell a nasty joke, you can tell it about a Martian or shut up. And that was the rule in our house. We were allowed to tell Martian jokes, but no other kind.
Well, I should have, except the thing is in World War II, and it wouldn't make sense if I said a Jovian, a Martian, a Venusian.
Yeah, anyway, right. It does make it harder.
All right. Listen, I usually take a while longer to derail the show than this. This might be record time.
We'll just go right off the rails.
Yeah. Let's get back into, we were talking about you and how you changed careers. And so how'd you get into horror and writing and stuff?
Well, like I say, my dad was the creative writing director of a university, so I kind of grew up around it. People go, how did you start writing? And in my family, it was much weirder not to write. There was like books on every surface. You could always tell if somebody was reading a really good book because they seemed constipated. Like, they wander into the bathroom, and 3 hours later, it's like, can you finish the chapter so other people can use the bathroom? And so I'd just been telling stories my whole life, but I didn't want to be, kind of that stereotypical, the image of the 40-year-old rock star, bringing girlfriends home to his mother's basement and being like, any day, baby, I'm going to make it big, So I became a lawyer because that seemed like a good default profession for someone who was reasonably articulate and wasn't afraid to read. And it worked out okay. But like I said earlier, my wife got really sick. I also had some health problems, but eventually I was invited to leave the law firm, and I tried really hard to get another grown-up job. I liked having things like dental insurance and health insurance and, job security. And it just didn't work, and it didn't work. And so I would look for jobs all day. And then at night I would write these stories, and I started just belting books out, trying to make something of it. And before I got a grown-up job, I started making grown-up money as a writer instead. And, I sold a couple of screenplays back to back, and that was very propitious. That gave us, the health insurance we needed, and gave us enough of a cushion that I could start making the novels work a little bit. And it just kind of grew over time. And it really was like a slow growth. There was no, suddenly I was popular. It was just, I tell people, because I've been on, shows like this, I've been on NPR, I've been on TV and stuff. And they go, how do I get on those big shows? I'm like, well, you start with a show where the audience is the podcaster. And then you graduate to one where it's the podcaster and the podcaster's mom, and like, you just get a little bit bigger each time, hopefully, and use the previous one to say, look, I can jump up a level too. And that's kind of just how the career went. So I've just continued doing that. I teach writing and publishing and marketing at bestsellerlife.com, which is kind of my other gig. And so I'm either telling stories or teaching stories pretty much 100% of the time.
Very good. So you said it was a slow growth. So I guess we should start with the start. What was your first work, and what was your first work where you started realizing, hey, at some point you said you make grown-up money. So what was the first work, and what was the first work where you started to make what looked like it was going to be grown-up money, or in fact was grown-up money?
So yeah, it's actually kind of the same. It's the same answer, but it's not, because I know people who are like, oh, I've been successful since the beginning. I wrote a book called Run, and it was kind of my first book that went out there, and I tried to get it published in every publisher in the United States and Canada. I tried, I have 2 4-inch binders full of single page rejections. And after, years of that, a friend of mine said, why don't you try this Kindle thing? And it was pretty new, and I didn't even know what it was at the time, but I spent, a week and a half trying to figure out how to upload my book. And then I didn't think anything of it. And at the same time, my professional life is crumbling around me. But 6 months later, it was for a brief time, it was one of the top selling science fiction and horror titles. I think it was number 1 horror, number 2 science fiction, and it was in the top 100 overall. And I tell people that was awesome, but it was a huge disservice at the same time, because I didn't know what had happened. But that kind of early boost made me think I knew what I was doing. So I spent the next, 6 or 7 books just kind of wandering around clueless and making pennies, really. And it probably wasn't until I'd written 15 or 16 more books until I kind of started to figure it out. And it was easily 25 or 30 before I started making like regular, we can afford to live and be super successful, meaning I can pay my bills every month,
Right. Now, there's an expression that says, every author has one great book in them. But, it seems to me that that some of the greatest authors have several great books in them. I'm sure there are plenty of people who had one great book in them, and then there's also people who have lots of okay books in them. I mean, I don't want to pick on anyone, in particular, but I mean, you all know them. You go to the bookstore and you see they have a new book every 4 or 5 months, and they're all sort of a little bit of the same. I mean, I'm going to pick on one person because he's ridiculously successful and we'll never hear this show, but Clive Cussler. I mean, his books, they're all the same. He's like swimming in the ocean and hears screams, and there's a woman being attacked by pirates in the same ocean. Right. And his buddy says, don't get involved, and he gets involved anyway. And then, then there's a whole bunch of, exciting and unrealistic hijinks that ensue. I mean, and I'm sure it's the same thing for the romance novelists and stuff like that. Anyway, but, then there's Stephen King, who turns out book after book after book, and people love them. And, and I've read a fair amount of Stephen King books, but not enough to make any sort of judgment, other than obviously he's a prolific writer. But it seems like, you said it took you writing 15 to 20 books, to really get your groove. So you must be a prolific writer, and it sounds like maybe you've gotten better over time.
Well, gosh, I hope so. I mean, yeah, I'm coming up, I think, on 60 now.
Wow.
And the fact is, like, I know what you're talking about. I often, there's some people who just settle into a group because it makes them money. Like, I got to be honest, if I could spit out the same story every time and know I'd make $10 million a year, I would do that, because my first priority, I've never thought of myself as an artist. I'm just a guy trying to pay for my family's food,
Right.
I'm just a working stiff, and always have been. Even when I was a lawyer, people would write, I'm an attorney. I'm like, I'm just a lawyer. I'm just I'm doing a job, and so that's me. And I hope I've gotten better. But part of that is because, like I said, I do have this wife that takes care of me. And one of the things she does is tell me when I'm sucking at something. Every single book I read to her, and she loves me enough to say that did not work. That chapter was boring. Or she'll actually fold laundry a lot of the time while she's listening. And that's a good litmus, because if she's really intent on my underwear, I'm like, well, I'm not doing this very well. If she stops, I've caught her just standing there with something hung 6 inches in front of her face, and she's been like that for 20 minutes. And I go, okay, this chapter is really working because my wife forgot about the rest of the world. but it's really helpful to have, people who are willing to critique you. I think, especially if you're an indie, because recently I did my first traditionally published novel, which was called Grimworld, and it's a middle grade fantasy. But up until then, I was completely indie, and I had to listen very carefully to my audience. And I think that's one of the things that, if you become uber successful, it's like, who's going to tell you need to tighten something up if your last book sold 20 million copies? And I think you see a lot of that with those authors who are super successful. They do start recycling, sounding really similar, because there's a lack of people going like, didn't you say this 5 books ago? Which is something my wife has definitely said to me. And we all have, the things that we kind of harp on, or the things that we think are important thematically over the course of a lifetime. But yeah, you should definitely be kind of trying to stretch and change. And that's part of why I do all sorts of stuff. I'll do a horror, and then a kid's book, and then I'll do a romance, and I'll do a humor. And part of that's because the goal every time is I should be kind of terrified that I'm just going to fail, because this is something I've never done before.
This is great that you are a lawyer, that we can sort of live in both worlds of Garden of Doom and Garden Views, which is the sister show, but it's much more, a lot of legal and business and stuff like that. In this case, business. So legally, what do you do as a lawyer? Did you approach it any differently when you went from indie to sort of more than indie? I mean, did you approach copyrights more seriously? Did you hire an agent, a literary agent? Did you have non-disclosure agreements with people you submitted the books to, when before you were just hoping you just uploaded it to Kindle and hope nobody copied it? I mean, how did you approach it differently when you sort of realized, hey, I'm making a living here, I better take this seriously as a business? Or were you so wired as a lawyer that you always, even if you lost $23 on your project, you still took it seriously from the beginning, so that your legal business foundation was always there at inception?
I think the legal stuff was always pretty much there. The thing that was harder to wrap my head around was the marketing. I tell people I used to make like a 10,000% return on investment, and now, I make a 40-50% return on investment. But the difference is, then I was, I was spending $1 a month, and so I made my 10 back, and I was really excited.
Yeah.
And now, if you're making thousands and thousands of dollars a month, you see half of it go out the door right away, because you've got to pay for marketing and you have to pay for other things. The legal stuff's always been helpful, just because I'm astounded the number of artists, especially writers. We have this like weird mix of narcissism and cripplingly low self-esteem, because narcissistically we're like, my work will change the world. And then someone says, yeah, I like it and I'd like to publish it. And we kind of look over our shoulder and like, are you talking to me? What do I have to give you to do that? And so you see a lot of writers who just not only give their book away, but give rights away. They don't get paid what they're worth. So with the traditional publishing, I got a contract, and, I stood there and I was like, this is a terrible contract as far as from the perspective of any, if I read it as an attorney for my client, I'd say, this is not something you should ever sign. And so I was able to redline it and make little notes about why this was unacceptable and send it back. And that part is a lot easier than trying to figure out, how can I write, ad copy that's really going to spark people's interest, or how can I get people to sign up for my newsletter so I can sell them something down the road? That was the much bigger trip.
And you had success with redlining. They weren't like, no, dude, you're still too small time. They negotiated.
Well, they did. And here's one of the things that was nice is like my traditionally published book, and this goes along with like being in the business for a while. And one of the things I most harp on is, in any business, you can't walk into the room and say, I'm going to be the smartest or most successful person in the room. You don't have that. Someone else can always walk in and be smarter, or, more successful or richer, or whatever you want to say. You can walk in and say, I'm going to be the nicest and most professional person in this room. And you do have control over that. And that leads to natural consequences where you kind of start acquiring people who are willing to help you. So when I got my contract from the publisher, I already knew and was friends with their most successful author of that publisher. So I reached out to him, and he said, yeah, the contract I got was similar. Let me have you talk to my agent. So his agency ended up representing me for that contract. And because I had success on my own, I was able to talk to them and, say, I'm glad to give you a commission on what you do here. I don't want you touching my indie stuff because like you haven't done anything. And if I was a brand new author, they would have said no. I'm sure they would have said, well, we should get a little bit of everything because we're starting you out. But
right.
They were very nice and reasonable, and they said, yeah, you've got a whole career, and we're not going to touch that. We'll touch this traditional stuff. And so, there's this kind of mix between, where you are on the playing field and how you've played. If you walk out and expect to be, the first person on the field just because you tell everyone you're awesome, no one's going to accept that. But the reality is, if it comes down to, should I put this guy in or this guy in or this girl in or this girl in, the coach is going to look at, do they play well? And if they both play the same, the coach is going to go, well, I like that gal better, so I'm going to play her. And playing nice with people is just an incredibly valuable business asset, just to walk in and have people go, yeah, he's a delightful person and we'd rather have him around.
Well, that's nice to hear that works. I think probably also helped the legal background. Anyway, we're going to get out of Garden Views. We're going to go back into Garden of Doom because, I'm not sure how much of the audience is the same, probably 70% of it. But anyway, I don't want to go back to the beginning, but I'm really fascinated about your book Run in that it was a top sci-fi and a top horror book at the same time. And, I don't find that surprising at all necessarily, but I think it's, Alien is a terrific sci-fi and a terrific horror movie, and is probably, so is Terminator. But, to hear the book made it, and also it's your first, that's pretty incredible. So what was the premise of Run?
So the premise is it's this guy who's lived his whole life in this little tiny town in Colorado in the mountains. And the one time he leaves is he fights overseas. It's the first Iraq war. And he sees a guy blown up in front of him, a very distinctive looking person. And 10 years later, he's back in town working as the science teacher in this little town. And a new kid walks in. And when the new girl's dad picks her up, it's the same man. Who was blown up, and he's not only not blown up, but he hasn't aged in 10 years. And so this protagonist starts asking his friends, do you know who this family is? And these are people he's known his whole life. He's related to a lot of them. Every single person he says this to tries to kill him. And so by the end of the book, it's called Run, partly because he's on the run from his whole town and he has to figure out what's going on. And that's the horror aspect. There's other horror aspects. The people who die don't seem to stay dead, and they survive horrific injuries and stuff like that. But I've always enjoyed, just in my writing in general, I like going, this is genre A, and by the end, the last page, I go, haha, you were also reading genre B, and having people not get mad, but go, oh my gosh, I totally was. That's awesome. Just kind of like pulling the rug out from under people is one of the most delightful, fun parts of being an author.
So they were fighting Deadpool Venom, basically.
Yeah. And then they get to the end and they find out, oh, what's really happening behind the scenes totally changes everything you ever thought of. In fact, I remember my sister read it. It was really one of the nicer conversations I've had with my sister that opened with cursing, because she just called and started yelling, words at me. And I was like, what's going on? And she goes, I got to the end of Run. And I went, oh, okay, this is good cursing. Awesome.
Right. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
That's almost as good as you tricking your wife into folding your laundry by reading to her. I mean,
totally. Yeah. I mean, that's the only reason I write books, is so I don't have to fold laundry anymore.
That's as good a motivation as I can think of. I mean, and by the way, kudos, applause. Well done, old man. Well done. Terrific. All right. So off of Run. So tell us about some of your other projects. You said you're a screenwriter, and I mean, has anything made it to the big screen? Would we recognize any of the titles?
No, absolutely not. I tell people I wrote some very, very good screenplays that made the rounds around Hollywood. One of them was a scary script, and I actually had adult producers calling and saying, like, I had to sleep at my parents' house last night. Like some 40-year-old man or woman saying, this was so scary, I literally went home to mommy and daddy because I didn't want to stay in my Los Angeles apartment by myself.
Wow.
And I tell people, so I wrote these really great screenplays that through the magic of Hollywood became movies. And that's, like what I can say about them as far as positive stuff. They didn't turn out super well, but that's okay. The people that I worked with were awesome. One of them, it looked like it was going to be theatrical. And I'll always remember they called me in because they were going to do DVD extras. And they said, so you should see the movie. because you're going to get interviewed tomorrow. And I said, great. And I went in, they had a screening room set up, and it was really nice. And I walked in, and my name appeared, yay. And then the movie bore almost no resemblance to what I remembered. And I walked out, and the whole production team is right there. And they're like, what'd you think? And my thoughts were, well, I really liked working with you. I liked the money you gave me, and I'd like more of that. But I don't want to lie. And so I kind of twisted in the wind, and I said, the only thing I could think to say was the music was really good. And after that, they finally kind of cut me loose. They're like, it's terrible. It's not your fault. There were some problems, behind the scenes. And they recut it, and it was much better, the second cut, but it still wasn't good enough to get a theatrical release. And that's okay. There's a lot of jokes about the writer being the least important person in Hollywood and getting crapped on all the time. And there's some truth to that, in that, you hand over your book or your screenplay, they bought it. They can do whatever they want with it. And if you're very lucky, they'll ask you to do rewrites, or they'll ask your opinion. But you can't be very precious about your work in that industry. And if you are, it's really soul crushing. So I've always adopted this, like, hey, I'm trying to make a really good hamburger that'll fill people up and that I can do over and over in different ways for different people. But that's kind of my job, is just to be a workman and a craftsperson, and be out there helping. So the movies, they didn't turn out great, but the checks cleared. And like I say, like the insurance that we got through one of them allowed my family to have, my wife needed an operation really badly, and she got it. So I'll be eternally grateful to that movie that never saw the theaters, because it paid for that.
Okay, well, I won't ask them what it was. Was this like pre-Shudder, Apple, Amazon, all of these streaming services?
Oh, yeah.
So are you going to try to maybe turn Run or other works into screenplays, and maybe shop around to some of these more niche and content places that need original content, or are more likely to use original, rather than just do, listen, I love, with a D in parentheses at the end, the MCU, because I'm a little bit out, but like a battered spouse, I'm ready to go back in.
Right.
And listen, I hate the Fast and the Furious. I've never enjoyed a single one, so I'm going to throw them other. But like a Fast and Furious, there's studios they'll just keep running those things until the wheels literally fall off. But there's so much more competition for content now. I guess my question is, are you prepared to try again and shop? Because it doesn't sound like you were scarred. You're like, I got the money, I got what I needed, and it didn't work. The movie stunk, but the original work is still good.
Yeah. And I would totally be willing to do it again. And I still have feelers out there. I've optioned another half dozen movies. It's incredibly rare, even with the competition level now. It's really rare to be able to do what I wanted to do, which is I wanted to just write the story and have them do the movie work. Like, right. I don't want to be a director. I don't want to be necessarily on set. I just want to be like, here's my story, make pictures out of it. And it's still really tough to do that. And the fact that I was able to do it several times is really awesome. So yeah, I would be happy to do movies again. And I very often kind of monetize my books by writing a script for the movie as I'm writing the book. Not every time, but a lot of the time they grow up together, and that way I've got something ready. And the feelers are always out there, but this is an odd thing, but I tell people success is sort of like rolling a snowball up a hill. And the more success you have, the harder it is to roll up the hill. Not just because of weight, but there's simply more surface area. There's more things to be accountable of and to pay attention to. And so I have less and less time as my novel career keeps moving up. I have less and less time to be like in Hollywood. I do love screenplays. I love screenwriting. I was actually, before this, I was reading a screenplay just for fun because I love reading them. And so, yeah, I'm always willing to do it, but it's a time management thing. And again, I look at it at the end of the day, I'm like, where can I get the most money for my time? Because that's my primary interest, has always been being a dad and being a husband. And, I'm a family man. I've never viewed myself as like, I'm an artiste. I'm just some dude who's out digging ditches so that my family can eat.
I'm going to venture back into the garden views realm for a while. I'm going to stop saying that because it doesn't matter. But when you said that you sell the screenplay to someone, they can do whatever they want with it, and I know that that's the norm. But is there a middle ground? Is there something where you're licensing the option for amount of time, and if they don't do right by it within 4 years, maybe it's convertible. If they can, it converts to rights if they can get it to theatrical, but if not, it reverts back to you. Sort of what like Marvel and Sony has with Spider-Man or the X-Men or whatever. I mean, does that exist, or is just the leverage so disproportionate? Unless you're like a Stephen King, maybe, or even then, maybe not. I don't know. But is that a possibility? Is that something that's done, or has anyone explored it? I guess you can put the question mark wherever you like.
If you're talking about there are definitely options where, and I've had that lots of times where they say we'd like to take your screenplay and turn it into a movie, but we don't want to buy it, so we'll put money down, 10% or whatever, and if it gets made, if we actually start production in the next 2 years, we'll give you the balance of the purchase price. So that's fairly standard. People get screwed in options all the time. So, as far as just business practices, anybody who's listening and they're like, I want to be a writer, my first thing is, well, you have like a good chance of being able to read them. So you should definitely read the contracts before you sign them. And if you don't understand them, don't sign them. A lot of people just sign away too much because they're not willing to ask questions or put up a little bit of fight. And by fight, I mean, just like have a discussion, go, this doesn't work for me. What can we do about it? So options, that are kind of time delayed purchases, those are very frequent. Options where you have any kind of say in the final product, that's never going to happen. I guess if you are like J.K. Rowling, it happened because she was writing the book series while the movies were being filmed. So she was sitting in on the discussions and saying, no, you can't do this. I read an interview where at one point, one of the writers was going to say something about Dumbledore, his past love life, as like a girlfriend or something, a fiance, some tragic love life. And she wrote a note, said, can't do that, Dumbledore's gay, which, she was going to talk about, not even in the books, but somewhere down the line. And so that sort of thing, but that's very much the exception. Even people like Stephen King, just look at the amount of Stephen King stuff in the world right now. He's got his own Marvel Universe situation. It's the SKEU, the Stephen King Extended Universe. And I guarantee you, he's not looking at every script. He's not signing off on all of those. And he's been very vocal about the fact that some of the movies that were made in the height of his popularity just stank.
Yeah.
And so, movies are much more collaborative. When I tell people, part of the reason I don't get upset about the movies not being as good as I hoped is because I realized I was really upset I watched the DVD of one of these with my wife, and I was upset because I wish they had done a good job with it. It could have meant so much more to our family if it had been in the theaters. And she made me watch all the credits, and she said, honey, you gave all these people jobs because they wouldn't have had that without your words.
Aww.
And then when she said that, it made me feel really good. But I also realized, and all of these people had the chance to ruin my movie. It's kind of a miracle. Any good movies happen.
That's right. All right, so we're going to try and get off the business and legal stuff. What are some of the topics that you love to write about, or that you have loved writing about? Like you said, you could have the same story over and over again. I'm thinking, different country vampire, one country werewolf, one country skinwalker, one country demon, one country Nephilim, Gollum, right. Whatever you want, same story. But what is it that you love to write about or have written about? What are some of your favorite works?
Well, I don't have, my favorite book is always whichever one I most recently finished, just because it's pleasing to write the end and not be terrified anymore. Because like I said, I'm really, every single book, there's a moment where I come down the stairs kind of like, I stink. And my wife has to go, oh, we're doing this again. Okay, you're okay. Go back up and keep working. You'll figure it out. But there's themes that come up over and over again. I like writing about families. And part of that is just business stuff because, not everybody has been a hot teenager banging in the woods. Like I certainly never was.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody comes from a family. I mean, you may not know it.
I was, of course. I just want the audience to know
I could tell that looking at you.
Yeah, of course, right.
But me, I just, I didn't have the prerequisite hotness for that. So even if I'd been interested, I couldn't have fulfilled the casting call. But everyone has a family, most of us have at least a mother or a father, and a lot of us have both. So I tend to write about families, and I like writing about good families. I think that we see a lot of situations where everybody's a no-show, which is good dramatically, I have to do this all by myself. But I like seeing situations where, hey, the whole, mom and dad are love each other and are coming together to work on stuff, and it still isn't working out. So I think that just is interesting. So I like writing about families. I do write a lot about multiverse stuff, which I was doing before Marvel did it. I just think that stuff's fascinating, trying to figure out ways to keep the stakes high, because as soon as you introduce time travel, life after death, or multiverse, it's like, well, do you really have to get it right this time? Because like you can just go back and fix it.
Right.
So finding kind of fresh ways to do that is always fun for me.
That's exactly why I don't like those things, unless they're done really well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like trying to figure out a way either where it's people don't know that that's a part of it until the very end, and using it just kind of deep in the world, kind of go, haha, in addition to all these stakes, there's stakes untold. That's kind of fun. But yeah, I remember I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My wife and I would watch that together every week when it came out. And there was an episode where one of the main characters came back from the dead, and I still watched it, but I was like, well, does any of this matter? Because like, who cares? They can come back from the dead. If somebody dies, they're clearly going to bring them back if they want to. And that's uninteresting to me, where things don't matter. I kind of throw up my hands in despair at movies. Horror movies do this a lot, where you walk in and at the end, everybody's dead. Nobody learned anything, and the audience wasn't edified. Like, I love horror movies. I don't like being lectured to for 2 hours about how life is dirt. We live in dirt. We start in dirt. We end in dirt, and the purpose is dirt. I like, art to make sense of things, or help me encapsulate or frame ideas better in a way that's useful. So those are kind of the big themes with me. And also just kindness, which again, like, I live in my business. I try and be a kind person. And every good thing I've had in my life has not come because like I was the most talented or the best looking, as you can tell.
No, you are a tragically handsome man.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's another guy. My first name's Michaelbrent. There is a guy who, for a while, his name was Michael, last name Brent, who was an underwear model, and it's really crushing to have a fan walk up and see you and kind of be like, oh, and go, yeah, I'm not the underwear guy.
Yeah. You haven't seen me with my clothes off.
Yeah, good thing for that.
I just dress paunchy. I dress ugly. I'm 6'4". I just dress down.
Yeah, exactly.
I am going to hit you with, and this to prove to the audience I do very little pre-production. I'm going to ask you about certain authors or books, and if you agree or disagree with me. And there's a good chance you haven't read these particular authors or books. So, are you familiar with the Michael Cronin vampire books?
What's that? So here's the thing. I have a thing called aphantasia, which keeps me from remembering names very well. What's the names of the books?
Yeah, I think the first one is The Passage. I think the second is The 12, and I don't even remember the name of the third because I never read it. But The Passage
I read
in
The
particular.
Passage. I don't remember a thing about it, which should tell you how much it impacted me.
Okay. All right. So in The Passage, it was a vampire book where vampires, it's like a virus, sort of like The Strain. They came out around the same time. I think that this book was more successful than anyone thought. I don't think there was supposed to be a sequel because I thought the end was perfect. You obviously don't remember, but the end was basically they had finally made it to what seemed like a surviving human military base, and they're sending a message, and the message ends mid-transmission, meaning the vampires got it and everyone's dead.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And I thought that was perfect. And then there was a sequel. And I think that the publishers say, you need to write a sequel. We don't get books like this that often. And I think that, the second book, while not terrible, just wasn't good. But do you remember at least thinking if that ending was perfect?
Oh, yeah. I do. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh, I do remember that. And that was really fun. Yeah, I do think so. And that's always one of the problems with a corporately ordered sequel is like, if the storyteller's done his or her job, the characters have already been taken to the utmost limit of sanity and damnation. Like if you push it any farther, they lose by definition. And so it's really hard to eke a sequel out. And even if you do like a prequel or something like that, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the Hunger Games prequel is a good example of that. It was, I enjoyed the Hunger Games books quite a lot. My wife loved them, and so I read them because I read long stuff with her. And then I read the Songbirds and Snakes one, and I was like, well, that was a corporate prequel. That was ordered for money, and it wasn't delivered because anyone cared about it.
Yeah, see, I don't know that I'm right. I just hope that I am, because otherwise, anyway, Michael Cronin, if you're out there and you're listening, then you want to correct me or confirm, you can just tell me. I won't tell anyone else. Now, The Strain that came around, I thought The Strain, the first book, was fabulous. The second book, it was okay. But the third book, it just got to, bleh. And, Sticking the Landing, you sort of feel the same way?
Yeah, I actually liked I feel very similarly about there was the series on FX, and it started off strong. I feel like right around that period of time, and I can't name any names, but I'm feeling like I was watching a lot of TV where I went, yeah, I'm really excited. And by the end of first season, I was like, I'm not sure I'm excited anymore, because it was clear someone had a great idea and wasn't pressed about where they're going to go with the great idea.
Yeah. And also in the series, a lot of bad toupees. Like a lot of bad hair pieces. That really takes away from me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be that superficial, but I am, and it's TV.
No, it matters.
Okay. Did you ever read anything by Jeff Long?
Again, you'll have to give me some
titles. The Descent or Year Zero?
Oh, I want to say I've read Year Zero, but I can't remember that one at all.
Okay. Year Zero, basically the premise is archaeologists stumble upon a necropolis.
Where they dig into the earth?
Yes.
Yes, I did read the first one. Yeah.
And it releases a plague, and we have no cure for it. So they actually clone the people from, Mount Arafat or Mount Olive, wherever it was. And it turns out one of the clones just might be Jesus.
Right.
So anyway, it's so in there is a great book. It's not a great book. It's a good book.
Yeah.
But in there is a great book. But I thought the end was great. But The Descent is actually my favorite Jeff Long book and my favorite book. And everyone in the audience is probably saying, ugh, you and The Descent again. But I thought it ended almost perfectly. And then it took like 8 or 12 years to write a sequel called Deeper, which started great and then ended. And like it did not visit any of the parts I thought made The Descent awesome. And I'm just like, ugh. Why? But did you? Are you familiar with either of those works?
I read The Descent and I enjoyed it a lot, and I enjoyed. That was one of those where just the concept was so much fun.
Loved it.
And I've spent enough time. Like I worked as a reader in Hollywood, so much of that is built off of like, how can we encapsulate this in a trailer or a log line? Like, can you pitch this to me in a single sentence? And I just love the concept of The Descent, and so I was willing to follow that along. I didn't like. It's not one of those, it takes a lot for me to look at a book and go, I wonder if there's more of this.
Right.
I'll read an author that I really enjoy, but it's pretty rare that I go, oh, I hope there's a book too, because again, like I'm looking at story as like a person who's putting stories together as I go. I can't help but edit, and there's very few books where I went, I could not think of a single way to improve that. Please tell me more. And so I didn't keep going, but I enjoyed it. I really did. It was one of those where I read it at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. It was kind of the equivalent of one of those kind of movies that come on and you never would have watched it if you were watching TV at a normal time.
Right.
But you picked it up and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I did, because I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Yeah, I love The Descent. It's absolutely my favorite book. It's one of the only books I reread periodically. All right, enough about that one. Okay, the book by Dan Simmons, The Terror, which I thought was an absolutely brilliant book in almost every way, shape, or form. I think at the end, maybe he got the best ending he could have, but the end didn't exactly work for me. It's sort of like a little bit of a magical cop-out. And I thought the miniseries that they did, I think it was A&E or AMC, I think it did it pretty well justice.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that miniseries was one of the bleakest experiences I've ever had in TV, like on regular cable. If you're not going deep into someplace that's made their mark in the world just by purely being edgy. It was A&E or TNT or one of those like basic cable services, and I watched it and went, holy crap, man, I'm kind of depressed all the time now, because it was just unrelentingly one piece of bad news after another. And I felt sort of similar. And first of all, it was such a good book. The research was so good. He did such a good job. It's really hard to set something in an older time period and sort of mimic the feel of old-timey writing without boring a modern audience. And he did such a good job with that. And it's been quite a while since he wrote it, and it still works, which is another hallmark of really good writing, is it like doesn't, there's so many things that you think are great, and then you read them a year later and you go, wow, that was definitely great for 2012 or whenever I experienced it.
Yeah.
And The Terror I've read several times. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And what you say about the end being kind of a magical cop-out, that's one of the problems that horror writers face typically, is that ending, because one of the things that really defines horror, and I use that term ironically, is the fact that the undefined stuff is so terrifying. As soon as you figure out what the monster is and how to kill it, it's by definition not scary. The whole thing is about we have no feasible plan to defeat this creature. And it can be zombies, or it can be vampires, or it can be like in the Terror, which was a huge combination of a lot of things, were the scariest parts. And oftentimes the not monster is scarier. Like I was freaked out as much by the Shackleton situation, just being in the snow and not being able to get home. That was the scariest part for me. Or the idea of poisoning and stuff like this. These were all kind of like things that touched my buttons much more than any supernatural thing did. But as soon as you kind of go, which you sort of have to for the book to be satisfying, and say, here's what the monster is, and here's how we either got out of it or didn't. Immediately the audience kind of is going to go, oh, is that all?
Right.
Pretending they wouldn't have been just as terrified had they been in that situation. And that's one of the things we like to do as an audience, is say, I never would have run up the stairs. I never would have panicked. I never would have done this. And I'm like, well, I've been in some of those situations. And guess what? You totally do that stupid stuff.
Right. Yeah, but the Terror, bleak is a great word to use, because it is bleak, but it's also beautiful at the same time, which is sort of a...
It was so lyrical.
Yeah, it really was. All right, so we agree on that one. That's terrific. Okay, let's switch to a TV show. Lost. Brilliant in premise. Everyone figured out the premise right away. The producers said that's totally not the premise, and by the end, it was totally the premise. So I think it actually stuck the landing, but it didn't stick the landing because it lost sort of the third act. Yeah. So
yeah, the first I still say the first episode was 2 of the best hours that have ever been made on television ever. 45 minutes after commercial breaks back then, but
right.
It was astounding and it floored me. The whole first season was excellent. I don't think they stuck the landing, because my impression is they said, no, it's not that. No, it's not that, because they didn't intend it to be that. I think about season 3. Part of the problem is, and J.J. Abrams does this a lot, and it drives me nuts, is like, he would roll a hit to the high point and then go, now I'm going to go do something else, and leave everyone to pick up the pieces of his idea or the stuff he created without much of a roadmap. So I think, it was clear the ratings were going down, and the producers and the TV people were going, this is going to be the end. And there was a whole lot of people in the writer's room saying, oh crap, I have no idea.
Right.
Because the ending that they did come up with was sort of the ultimate junior high school cop-out that anyone who has taken a 9th grade writing course has been told by their teacher, and under no circumstances are you allowed to do this.
Right.
It's really kind of the refuge of people who have painted themselves into a corner so fully that they can't get out. And that's a danger that happens with episodic television, because like if you're writing a book, I love book writing because writer's block is so easy to address, because you just go, what could get them out of there? A helicopter. There's no helicopter in the book. Okay, well, I'll go back and rewrite chapter 2 so there's a helicopter in the book. But if you've got 4 seasons of world building with no one ever sitting down and going, what exactly does this mean? You're left with a lot fewer options that can wrap it all together. And they chose something that worked, but I found it lazy. And I still, to this day, I started my kids watching Lost. Because that's one of the things I do is every summer we'll have these are important things in cinema, or these are important things in TV, and we watch a bunch of movies. And we started watching Lost, and I said, and we will stop at season 3. And I'll just tell you how it ends, because it's not going to get any better than that.
Right. Well, do your kids understand the concept of purgatory?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, we're a religious family, so we talk about stuff like that. That's, you know, one of the benefits of being a religious family is you can draw from all those old mythology things.
Well, the goofy, I'm about to get myself into trouble, but the Catholic Church eliminated purgatory. They said there is no purgatory. They eliminated it from canon. How do you go ahead in 2014 or whatever, and just say there's no longer purgatory? I mean, it sort of ruins, like, I don't know, maybe it was too close to, like, you know, every other underworld, you know, the pre-Christian underworld.
I think they were just worried people were looking around going, this is kind of purgatory. I mean, aren't we already doing that?
Well, it could be looking around and saying it's worse than purgatory, but you know, I'm not sure that expression about the greatest trick the devil ever fooled us is actually the actual punchline in that one. But actually, it's the wrong episode. It's the right show. But anyway, maybe the wrong guest, maybe the right guest. I don't know. Maybe I just gave you a book idea. I don't know. But it seems like it's okay. I have a theory. This has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about, but maybe it does a little bit. I believe that all monsters are chimera of some sort, and I believe that all chimera come from people from around the world teaching their kids, and so that they could learn it as adults, how to not get lost and how to get home or how to get to different cities when they were just navigating by the stars. And because different people saw, you know, the stars are in different places during different times of the year, and depending on where you are on the earth, you have different views. And also, you know, not everyone, when they saw Leo, saw a lion. Some people saw something else or whatever. And so all chimera are mixtures of these things, and they just basically drew pictures saying, you know, the pictures of the various chimera was basically a map. That is my theory. Yeah. I think I'm brilliant. I think I deserve a PhD from many universities just for that. Have you ever heard that before? And do you agree? And if not, why are you dumb?
I don't think I've ever heard it put in those terms. I think I do agree to a large extent. I would say part of the chimera, the largest part, the thing that, you know, if we were to actually draw what it looks like, it would look like the person telling the story, because that's the biggest determiner, is the lens through which we look at things. I had a really good example of that. My father-in-law, who's a storyteller, not like, he doesn't tell stories like I do. He's one of those talkers. You know, you'll say, how much are eggs? And you get a discussion of something that happened to him when he was 5 years old. And it's a cool story, so I don't mind it. But he was telling me a story. He was in this accident, and he kind of looked at me and said, here's how you know none of my stories are true. Because he was in an accident, and he had to be deposed for it. And 20 years later, he found the deposition, and the story he was telling 20 years later about the accident, honestly telling, believing it to be a true story, bore no relation to what he said 2 months after the accident. And so many of our stories, and so many of the things that I love that you said they're lessons. They're teaching us how to avoid things that we personally fear. But so many of those stories get blown out of proportion or get corrupted by the passage of time. My son, I was telling him something. I was kind of harping on something that he did over and over. And he was, I think, 17 or 18. So we're at that age where, you know, adult males are butting heads. And he kind of walked off in a bit of an upset. And my wife went and told him, she said, you know, your father, this stuff has happened to him, and he's just trying to make sure you avoid it. And my son was kind of like, the world has changed, and that stuff doesn't happen that way anymore. So I appreciate the lesson, but he's doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, and so much of the stories that we tell are about, like, the lessons we learn. We're passing on things that we hope our descendants will achieve, and we're teaching them how to avoid the things that frightened us. And some of them have no relevance. And so I think rather than look at the previous generation, at our parents, we don't look at our parents when they tell us a scary story and go, well, that's not accurate anymore. You know, like, we go, that doesn't fit in my framework, so I'm going to invent a monster that does, that I think is what they're talking about. You know, communication is such an iffy thing to be able to transmit the idea I have into another person's head. Which again is another lesson I learned so well when I was married, because this is the person I know best and who knows me best. And I think we communicate a good solid 50% of the time.
Hall of Fame numbers there.
Right.
I think the true visionaries are the ones who see the things way before the rest of us. I mean, you can go with your Orwells and your Huxleys and Arthur C. Clarke's, but I mean, iRobot. I mean, everything, Ex Deus Machina or Ex Machina, whatever it was called. Her, Alita, Battle Angel, Terminator, all of those things. Those are all iRobot, which is just an advancement, I suppose, of Frankenstein. But and maybe it goes back even further. But let's just stick with the objective science fiction. But I mean, so I guess we can play a little game. What would you project to be, based on the lesson that your son told you, on the lesson that you tried to teach him? What would you see of the horror that maybe you wrote it now and it's not, it would resonate now, but in 50 years or 75 years, it'll be even more terrifying?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that's such a good analysis, because like Frankenstein, if you think about it, it does still exist in the forms you said, but it's teaching lessons that are totally different. Mary Shelley was talking about like science has maybe gone too far. And not just science has gone too far, but because that is God's domain, like that was it had a stronger kind of Judeo-Christian underpinning. And now we look at it and we're more likely to say it's apt to be the Terminator, because we're not like, this has offended God in his heavens. It's, what if the machines wipe us out? What if they get tired of being interrupted? Like GPT 4.0 just came out, and O stands for omniscient or omnipresent or something like that.
Nothing scary about that.
No, not at all. But they showed video of these people talking to it, and I was like, that's cool. And then they would interrupt it when it went astray. And I said, so we're teaching a bunch of men how to interrupt a vaguely feminine sounding robot that has no negative possibilities whatsoever. And it was just looking at that. I think one of the things I would predict.
The sacred feminine comes back in the form of the internet.
Yeah, no, the thing, I think it's going to screw up, interrupt personal relationships, because the more we interact with a robot, the more we're going to think that that's normal behavior. Like I use ChatGPT, and I find for a while I was going, thank you. I was typing out thank you.
Right. And
then part of me went, well, that's stupid. It's a robot. I still do it, because I was like, I don't ever want to get to a point where not saying thank you is my default. But I think we're going to be facing the two big things we're going to face in the future are, number one, just treating each other like machines, because machines have become our best friends.
Right.
And number two, a complete dearth of plausible information, because, one of the things I'm proudest of, I told my kids, I was like, if mom got a picture of me having sex with another woman, she would want to talk to me. Okay, I'm not saying she's naive, but she would also be like, and by the way, I'm pretty sure we should hire this guy, the Photoshop person, because this is really good. Because she knows me and knows me well enough that under no circumstances is her first response going to be like, yeah, definitely Michaelbrent banged some chick. And I think that we're going to all have to kind of buckle down. And the biggest currency is going to be our humanity. We're going to rely more on reputation as being the ultimate currency than we are going to rely on kind of fungible assets like video and audio, which have become so replaceable. You could totally Photoshop me in flagrante delicto with anything.
Well,
and that's not even a stretch.
You should expect this from the guy with a show called Garden of Doom, but the fungible asset I thought you were talking about was trust.
Oh, absolutely it is, but that goes with treating people like robots, because you don't have to trust your machine, because as soon as it defaults to negative outcome, meaning like as soon as it's consistently giving you what you don't want, you throw it out and you get a new machine. And so the more we treat people like that, the more trust we view as something that's just a token thing we enter a relationship, rather than being a foundational requirement for humanity, because we do need to treat each other differently than that. I have no qualms about, like, look, I bought my green screen screws it up. That's awesome. I bought a Mountain Dew and I drank the Mountain Dew, and I feel no qualms about refilling it with water, because it's like, it's a good water container. So I have my little water bottle that says Mountain Dew. I would feel very differently if I was replacing my wife's physical appearance because I didn't like it, or my wife's emotional appearance because I didn't like it. But I think that we run the risk of that, of people going, why can't you just be more like my computer? Why can't you just do exactly what I say all the time, listen to me, not be mad when I interrupt, and just obey? And humans aren't like that.
Right.
And
we are not
the
slaves.
other human is also expecting that.
Right. The book, what was the Alter Carbon series, where bodies are just sleeves? Yeah.
Yep.
Another series that started good and sort of lost its way. And I'm not even talking about the books. The Netflix one, the season 1 good, season 2. All I have to say about Anthony Mackie is he landed the Falcon in Captain America. Good for him, because all of his other choices have been disasters. Like he could look at my choices and that'd be a sick burn. He'd win. All right, I feel he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm still the Falcon dude." And you're what, right, podcasting on your love seat? Okay, cool.
Hey, but you know what? That's a sign of wisdom for you. I think that's awesome, because so many Monday morning quarterbacks really kind of in their heart of hearts think they could have played the Super Bowl better.
Oh, no.
So I think if we are at least sitting here and being like, but I don't know, like that allows us, the very smart people are aware how smart they are. But I really think the very smartest people are aware above all how stupid they are. Like there's always more to learn, and we don't know everything.
I'm writing and putting you right down on my short list of best friends. So there we go. just for that, whether you like it or not. All right. I have spent a very pleasurable hour with you talking about pretty much everything except your works. And you are a multiple award-winning, award-nominated author and this, that, and the other thing. So tell us about some of the works that have been nominated and won awards. Let's promote you some.
Oh, that's awesome too. Although I've had a great time. This is, if I can have fun, I don't mind not talking about me. That's great.
I agree too, but I mean, you're on a podcast for a reason, and fun is great. And I love that my guests have fun, and I hope that my guests want to come back. But I want that reason to be fulfilled, which is to get people to look at your stuff and just maybe buy it.
Well, yeah, that would be nice too, I will admit. Well, first of all, just so that they know how, because one of the questions is always how to find you. My first name is it's Michaelbrent. It's all one word. And if you Google that, I'm the only guy named that. So you'll find my books. And it's always kind of hard to pitch me as an author simply because I write everything. Like when I'm at a Comic-Con or something and I'm selling books and people say, well, what should I buy? I just say, what do you like? And I point to the one book that fits that. Because I've been blessed to be able to range like that, which is something that most authors can't. They really do have to kind of be in one little tiny nook or another, because we have to do that to feed Amazon's algorithm or whatever. And I've been really grateful that I've had audiences who've kind of followed me. I'm best known for the horror, and I really enjoy that. It's home base for me because my dad was a Stephen King critic. He was the world expert on Stephen King, so I can do horror backward and forward in my sleep.
Right.
But I love doing all the other stuff. So if you like,
remind me to put a pin in The Dark Tower if we have time. But I mean, you are a multiple Bram Stoker nominee, so maybe that's a place. Mm-hmm. That's the place to start. Which of your works were nominated for the Bram Stoker Award?
I'm trying to think which ones they were, and I'm not sure because it was a little while ago. And that sounds dumb, but it's like I said, I love the award nominations, and it's so nice to hear from your peers or from like the Dragon Award is audience based, and it's nice to hear that the readers are like, let's give this guy an award. But I don't like put them up on my mantle or my mantle is where I have my kids' pictures, because those are my big awards.
Okay, you pick the award or the nomination and give it to us. Whatever got you onto Ranker. I don't want to. Because I don't want you to sound too much like Meryl Streep. Well, I can't remember which Oscar that was.
Okay, one I do remember was The Forest, and that's about three kids go into this forest, and only 2 come out, and they don't remember what's happened to the third kid. They're literally like their brain is, they had some horrible trauma. And 20 years later, these 2 kids have grown up and gotten married, and they're talking to a psychiatrist who basically encourages them to go back and find the forest and face it, kind of metaphorically more than anything. But of course they go and they find out what a very difficult situation it really was. As they kind of unpeel the onion of the past. And I really loved writing that one. A lot of people, like the reviews on that one were really mixed. A lot of people were like, I love it. Or they say it was boring because the biggest complaint, I think, is it's repetitive. And the reason is because the past and the future are constantly echoing each other. And at the end, hopefully I bring it all together. But I really enjoyed that one just because it has such a fun memory. My wife came home, and this is the kind of thing you have to live with when you're an author's spouse. She came home, and all of the furniture on our first floor had been pushed up to the walls. I don't remember what she was doing. She was out on some errand of hers. And there were 3x5 note cards covering the first floor of our house because it was such a complicated story. Sometimes I just kind of pants. I've written whole series just, well, we'll figure it out as we go because that was appropriate for the series. But this one really had to be plotted down to the most minute detail. And the only way I could figure to do that was spread all the cards out. And every time I ran out of room, I'd just push a sofa back or push a chair back. And so by the time she got home, it was just, I mean, it looked like a beautiful mind. I mean, like she was probably ready to call the police and be like, my husband's finally lost it. We were worried it's been years that we've been thinking this would happen. It finally tipped. But to her credit, she just kind of rolled her eyes and was like, is there anywhere safe to come in? And my recollection is I kind of grunted like garage, like, because I was just really thinking hard.
And she grunted back to you next time, garage.
Oh, well, the trade-off is, here's the trade-off. My kids and my wife have never had to compete with me, with my attention with football or sports because I'm not a sports guy. So they look at other families where the dad like disappears through football season.
Right.
And they're like, well, dad doesn't do that. But yeah, when he's figuring out a story, he is not super present.
That sounds great.
I'm not trying to be.
And you're also not an alcoholic or drug addict or gambling addict, and you're not going to the bars and chasing the hookers every night. All these great traits.
Right? I almost never do cocaine in front of them. No. They do. They have to put up with some weird things. They've also seen me a million times be in the middle of dinner and then just stand up without a word and walk off mumbling something over and over. I'll be like, tree, 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 tree. And they go, oh, Dad, because I forget stuff. And if my subconscious barfed up a hairball that's the answer to a story beat, a story question, I don't want to forget it. And so I run to the closest pad while saying a keyword, tree, 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 tree.
Right.
And they know they can't talk to me. When I first start
by the way,
they will very often.
Your tree thing is a lot like my chimera theory, if you think about it. But don't think about it too hard. Pick up what tree.
So they've got things that they definitely have to put up with. But I try and pay it off by being a reasonably good dad on the off season.
All right, that's great. Nobody cares about your family. Like, tell us about the scary stuff or the good science fiction. Let's hear about the story. Sell your stuff, man.
So let's see. So I told you about the forest.
Are you Googling yourself? Are you cheating right now? Just look behind you. You have a wall full of things that I assume that are yours.
Yeah, they're all mine, but they're not babies. They're hamburgers, and I really hope they go out and feed people emotionally and mentally. But then I'm on to the next one. The most recent thing I wrote, I was proud of because it's always fun to do something really different, and it was Grim World. Mm-hmm. And I had a nice experience with that, which was instead of just reading to my wife, I pulled my kids out of school for a couple days and read to my whole family because it's a middle grade fantasy adventure where these two kids get sucked into the world where fairy tales come from. Right. And they are based on old fairy tales, so not kind of sanitized Disney versions. They are the ones from
Grimm Brothers
fairy tales,
right,
which are just messed
right.
up. Like if
Terrifying.
you really want to read horrific stuff, read some of those original stories. Even as like a hardcore guy who likes horror stories, I was preparing for this book, and I would constantly be like, honey, get in here. You got to hear the messed up thing they used to tell their kids. There's all these stories of kids being killed. There's one where literally like a father has to kill his children for honor's sake. And he asks his wife and she's like, well, you do have to kill him. And that's the moment he kind of knows she's the one because like she agreed to kill the children,
Right.
So I really enjoyed Grim World. One of the ones I really loved, just because I was so proud of the effect it had, was Predators, which is about a woman who's in an abusive relationship, and she wins this all expense paid to a safari into Africa, and she goes on this safari, and bad things happen, so they end up miles away from any kind of assistance during the hottest, driest summer on record, which means everything's very hungry, and they're pursued across the African veldt by Africa's top dominant predator, which is actually not the lion like most people think. It's hyenas. And the thing I loved about that one was it was born of just this one image I kind of woke up having of this woman covered in mud holding this flaming burning stick and just screaming like a really primal thing. And as I read more about the setup, hyenas are matriarchal. The males have no place in their existence except the most basic. You make the babies and then you're nothing. And the female hyenas endure the most horrific stuff, like to have babies. Parts of them literally explode during the birthing process, in ways that, like, you know, I'd be bedridden forever, and they just get up, they're like, well, time to start hunting. So it's the toughest female predator in the world kind of thing. And everybody who survives the original inciting horror of the safari is female. And so it's this woman versus woman kind of action horror piece. And I love getting emails and letters from women going like, you are the first guy who got it right. You know, you never once mentioned boobs unless it was another male saying it in a way that proved he was an idiot, you know, kind of thing. And so that was really gratifying, because I've always kind of labored under the delusion that people are all kind of people. And having that validated, like, you know, I think I can write a woman because it's not going to be about her. It's not going to be about her sexuality only, or about her mothering only, or about, because they're multifaceted, rich people. And so I loved writing that. And that was actually one of the ones that got me on that ranker list. Was a person alerted me they had nominated me for it, for that list. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And it was because he just wrote one line back, like, predators, man. And that was really nice to hear. So that's one of the ones I'm really proud of, just from a, hey, I got it right kind of an effect. Another one that was an award nominated one was called Synchronicity. And that was one that I just wrote to be fun. You know, it's sometimes I go in there with like a big idea, capital big, capital I want to change the world. And sometimes I just want to write something that people can like eat popcorn and imagine it in the movie theater of their mind. Just a fun trip. And Synchronicity is about this guy who finds out that there is a machine that allows certain people with latent psychic talent to put themselves into another person's body, kind of take it over. Mm-hmm. And that makes it a perfect assassination machine. Sure. Because they can go and kill somebody using their best friend, and the best friend takes the fall. And the twist I added was, when they come back, they pull some of that person's talents with them. And they also kind of re-optimize their own mental hardware. So by the end of it, you have kind of these superheroes fighting each other. But they still have to deal with physical reality. So like, I can punch through a brick wall. I have the knowledge and ability to do that. I then have to fight the rest of the time with a shattered arm, because that's what happens to bones when they meet brick. Right. So I think that was nominated by the fans as much as anything, just because it was a fun concept. You know, it wasn't trying to save the world or change the world. It was just like, hey, let's have a good, you know, action fun ride.
Right. It's like two stories in one. It's sort of like you built your own Cerebro, but for the wrong purposes, and self-eugenicized, you know.
Yep. Yeah, and I love comic books. I love anime. I love the Sword Chronicles, which is a series. They're a YA series that's fantasy for the most part, until I pull the rug from under people in the second book and reveal a whole other genre that we've been actually living in. I love that because I was on an anime kick, and I was watching anime with my kids, and I just was like, I'm going to write an anime book. And I tried to capture, a lot of anime have this sense of like mixed technology. So you'll have kind of a vaguely medieval feel to the whole thing, and then someone will drive by in a car. Right. And it's just sort of accepted, you know, and part of that's just because their storytelling techniques in that part of the world are different.
Or cyborg squid.
Like, yeah. And I kind of was like, well, what could I do that would be like that? And so I wrote the Sword Chronicles just as much as anything, because like my kids like those kinds of things. You know, every single book I've had has had an aim behind it. And sometimes it's a big thing. Like, I'd like to say this thing. But sometimes it's just like, oh, that other book did it wrong. Let's, you know, like Lost Girl. My wife loved the Twilight books. And I will never badmouth Stephanie Meyer ever, because she got 10 million little girls reading. Mm-hmm. And I hope that Twilight was a gateway drug for him, and it got him onto better things. But I read the first book because, like I say, I like to read things my wife reads. And I just couldn't do it after that. I was like, I don't think I can continue reading these because they don't appeal to me personally. But tell me the story. And she did. And I was like, that's a really good story. I just kind of hated the way it was told. But there was one point where this girl, who's the main character, kind of chucks herself off of a cliff because she's so depressed about her boyfriend breaking up with her. Yeah, and I was like, that's not the role model I want my daughters to have. Right. So I wrote Lost Girl, which is about, it's got a similar vampire setup, and the girl starts out kind of mealy and not able to make her own decisions. And by the end, the whole point of it is she's going to decide whether she's going to be a vampire or not. She's going to make the decisions that matter in her life. And there are guys who help her and guys who hinder her. but she takes control kind of the agency. She's at the wheel of her own ship. And I wrote that so that my daughters could read it and say, like, you're going to meet abusive, crappy people, males and females, but you don't have to let them rob you of the control of your own life.
All right. Agree or disagree? Ginger Snaps should absolutely not have been killed at the end of Ginger Snaps.
Gosh, I don't think I've ever thought of it. I don't have an opinion on that because I can see it both ways.
All right. Jennifer's Body deserves sequels.
No, I thought, look, it's Diablo Cody has such a quirky, delightful way of writing. And I read the script for Jennifer's Body, and I read it all in one sitting, and I enjoyed, reading it. But I found it kind of, I don't know, it wasn't saying anything that hadn't already been said in other movies or other pieces of literature. I just didn't think it added anything except Diablo Cody's voice, which is always fun to read. I've read a ton of her stuff just because it's a hoot.
Okay. All right. The Dark Tower. We end with Roland actually improving. The Horn of Gilead is a new tool because he got it just a little bit closer to right, and next time he might just do a little bit better versus, it doesn't matter. He's just caught into this loop until he finally realizes he's supposed to rescue Jake in the cave-in. So
I did not get past book 3, I think, of The Dark Tower. And here's why. Because it was such a good story. I identified so much. The gunslinger loses his fingers to the crab monsters. And I read it right when it came out. So I was pretty young. And it messed me up. Like, I was weeping because the gunslinger lost his fingers. And I could never, to this day, it's like a PTSD thing. I've tried cracking the book several times and just can't do it.
It was sort of traumatizing to me also that, like, the gunslinger, that's his whole thing. He loses like 3 fingers or whatever, like in the opening scenes of like book 2 or 3. Yeah, I get it. I feel it. Okay. All right. Well, I probably should have asked you if you read it beforehand.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So, I lost my own track with my own little quick fire there. So that's all right. So are you familiar with Nephilim?
No.
Like, do you go into like biblical, mythological, like sort of monsters?
Sometimes like I said, I'm a religious person, which doesn't mean there's a lot of religious people who are offended when literature gets it wrong, or like, I can't believe they made the angel the bad guy. I'm like, that's a story. So I will put a lot of kind of underpinnings, but I rarely venture into straight religious stuff.
Why are they mad about that? Lucifer's an angel.
Yeah, no, and that's my thing is, like, even if it wasn't just a story, I'm like, well, you can see how it got there.
Of course, supposedly Lucifer's an angel anyway. I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah. I think they just sort of invented Lucifer to sort of demonize Odin, Mercury. I guess because I don't know where Lucifer came up. I don't know where it came to that Satan was Satan. That seemed to just be sort of invented around 1100 or so. I mean, But anyway, again, right show, wrong episode. I mean, there's plenty of names that you could put there: Samael, Azazel, Ozymandias, if you want. Even though that was just the Greek translation of Ramses II. But too much history and too much mythology sort of puts a lot of holes in the hull of certain religious mythologies if you take it literally. You don't. But the nice thing about religion is you don't have to take it literally. You just have to take it as parables for lessons. And I think that's part of where people get lost. But again, right show, wrong episode. Which would be the title of this show if it was going to do such a disservice to you, the actual guest. All right. So you've been really generous with your time, and listen. I think that we could probably talk forever, but I want to what should I have asked you about that I didn't? What did you want to talk about that we didn't? Very open-ended, I know.
I think you did a great job. I really enjoyed this. I very typically get the same questions over and over and over. So it was really fun just kind of getting down and talking about some specific books that other people had written, because that's just delightful to me. And yeah, I'm here to, market and do my PR stuff, but I also really like having human conversations. So I can't think of anything that I would have changed. I think this was great. If people want to find me, they can find me at writteninsomnia.com. That's my author website. Easy to remember because it's Written Insomnia, stories that keep you up all night. And if you're a budding author, go to bestsellerlife.com and look that up, because I've got a course that'll help you, I'm sure, because I've got so much there. But, I had a great time. This was awesome.
All right. Well, very cool. Well, listen, we're going to make things easier. Email me every link that you want me to have there. I'll just cut and paste and put them in the show notes.
Awesome.
And that way, nothing will be lost there. And folks, make sure you look at the show notes then. I mean, you should always look at the show. I actually think about what I write there. Now, sometimes I don't do a very good job, but I do think about what I write there. Do you have an outro song that you would like to be played, something that you attribute to you or your favorite book, or something that runs through your head as your comfort evil song? I don't know.
I don't have a comfort. When I'm writing, I actually do listen to music constantly, but I use it as kind of background. Like, I see authors put, here's my song, my playlist for a book, and I don't have that because, I range all over the place. But I will say, maybe enjoy the silence, because I would say people probably could deserve some after listening to me yammer for an hour.
Well, they had to hear me yammer too. Is that the Depeche Mode song?
Yeah, heck
okay,
yeah.
Okay. So, not that anyone needs to hear this, but if I had two songs, because it would require two songs because my brain is chaotic, to be the foundations of, it would be Billy Thorpe's Children of the Sun and Donovan's Atlantis. Those two songs probably are this show. Throw in a little bit of, Ronnie James Dio, and then, and Iron Maiden there too. But it's really really those two songs are mine, but I can't use them all the time. And Children of the Sun is like 8 minutes long, which is way too long for an outro. But anyway, so enjoy the silence, Depeche Mode. It's yours, Depeche Mode. I'm going to infringe on your copyright, but it's the outro, so it's de minimis, so take that. Ha! Don't mess with lawyers. It's been a pleasure. You're welcome back anytime if you want to talk about anything, any movie, any book, anything you want to promote. Come back anytime and shoot me that stuff. It'll make it into the show notes. And folks, check out his stuff. Buy his stuff. I know that authors love to have ratings and reviews, preferably good ones. So do I. Do it for me. Give me 5 stars. Give me reviews. I know that Apple does it. Pretty sure that Spotify does it now, and it's probably growing. And more than anything else, every content creator wants referrals, because nobody trusts you like your friends, and sometimes your mom. Though my mom rarely listens to my show. Thanks a lot, Mom. I mean, just put it on, turn the volume down, and let it run all night long. I mean, I don't care if you actually listen. It's just a little bit. Come on, Dad, you could do the same. I mean, what else are you gonna do? Actually, my parents, even at 82 and 83, they have much more active lives than I do. They always have. It's actually really sad. But all right, Michaelbrent Collings, thank you so much. Been an absolute pleasure, and this show will probably, today is the 18th. We'll probably drop within the next 4 to 6 weeks, and I will send you the link.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. This was it was super fun. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Very unnecessary, they can only enjoy the silence.